I wasn't always a pastor. I used to be a teacher. Straight out of university, I joined this program called Teach for Malaysia that ran for 2 years, and I taught in a low-income, under-resourced school. And every day, I'd face students who made it very clear to me that they'd rather be elsewhere. But strangely enough, I developed a love for teaching, and it unlocked a purpose I never quite knew I had. A couple of years later, I was at a family dinner and I was chatting with an uncle of mine, and this uncle began to tell me all about my father's education. You see, my dad grew up in a tiny village in the jungles of Borneo that was also in a low-income, under-resourced area, and the nearest school for him was a 5-day walk away. And yet, growing up, my dad would always tell me about the amazing education he had, how he had amazing teachers who taught him in English, how they gave books to them. Later on, my father would go on to graduate from university and be the first medical doctor from his tribe. But remember, this was in the jungles of Borneo, so it didn't quite make sense to me. So when my uncle told me that his teachers weren't any ordinary teachers, they were actually Peace Corps volunteers who came from America, they were young, fresh graduates. Sounds familiar. They taught for 2 years in a fellowship program. Also sounds familiar. They taught in a low-income, under-resourced area. Also sounds familiar. So it all began to make sense for me at that point in time. You see, my father could easily have been one of my students. And so when my uncle said my dad's teacher's name, his name is Judge Len, I got so excited, I was desperate to make a connection. And so I Googled him, I looked up his name, I got his contact, I emailed him, and then a few hours later, he shot an email back to me. And this is what he said. I'm very pleased that you have written to me. I spent 2 wonderful years teaching the first class that graduated from Lawa Secondary School. Your father was in that class. I found some old black and white photos. I will send them to you if you send me your address. I took them in 1965. Your father was one of my students, the best. This is the picture that he sent to me. It's a picture of my dad and his teacher, Judge Len. And honestly, it's one of the best gifts I've ever received. Because it's true what they say. A picture says 1,000 words. This picture gave me clarity about my purpose as a teacher. And in the same way, our vision gives us clarity about our values.